The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency! This
is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Nominate the youth sports volunteer that you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contests. And listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with the Hercules Hero of the Week, sponsored by Hercules First Federal Credit Union and the Beehive Meals. Gonna let you hear from sound from BYU coming up before the end of the segment. I thought it was interesting. We heard from all three quarterbacks competing for that starting job, plus what A-Rod has seen from them so far. And again, we're only a week into camp, so we'll see how that evolves. And if one of these names drops off, I suspect they will, but I don't know who. But we will see how that changes over the next coming weeks. I imagine at some point they will try to narrow it down to two. But I do think what is interesting with the coaches poll coming out today, preseason coaches poll for college football, 5 Big 12 teams make the top 25. They are in order. Arizona State coming in at number 11. Kansas State coming in at number 20. Iowa State at 21. BYU at 23. Texas Tech at 24. And then also receiving votes, Utah comes in at what would be 30. Baylor comes in at what would be 31st. Tulane, interesting, with Jake Retzlaff, comes in at what would be 36, 37, somewhere in that range. And then you also see Colorado and Kansas getting a couple of votes there. One of the storylines that I think really is fascinating this year, and again, last year we tried to break this down, and I think it ended up blowing up in everybody's face because the teams we expected to be good in the Big 12 weren't, and the teams we did not expect to be good were. Strength of schedule does just matter so much. So if the prognosticators are right, and in this sense it's the coaches' poll, BYU should be lined up for a very positive season this year. If you look at those 5 top 25 teams, BYU plays one of them. BYU plays one of those teams. Am I correct on this? Let me look at their schedule.
They play Iowa State and Texas Tech back-to-back.
Okay. Those are the two. And the difficult thing is BYU is on the road for both of them.
Those are the two teams on either side of BYU in the coaches poll at 22 and 24.
So BYU plays 2 of the 5 teams ranked in the top 25. Where this gets difficult, I think, for Utah. Let me see. This is October 25th. Utah plays 4 of these 5 teams, right? Now, the benefit for Utah is 3 of these 4 are at home, of the 4 that they play. Utah hosts Arizona State on October 11th, and I'm going in order of the opponent, quality of opponent, according to the coaches poll, not the date on the schedule. They play Kansas State. They host them on November 22nd. They do not play Iowa State this year, which is an advantage for Utah. They do go play at BYU on October 18th. That's the lone road game against the top 25 preseason team on Utah's schedule so far. And then they host Texas Tech. Now, the truth is, if you played a bunch of nobodies and you could go 12-0, that's probably your best case scenario. As boring as that is, it works. And with all due respect, because they're not nobodies, but Boise State has made a killing historically beating up on lesser opponents in the Mountain West Conference or whatever the conference they've been in, and they've reaped the rewards. And once you win at a high level, or you're seen on national TV, or you're playing in important bowl games, traditionally, not always, and Boise State has tested, I think, the limits of this truthfully, the recruits follow in some sense. They're not knocking down the door with 4- and 5-star guys, and some of that's because of where they play, and some of it's the NIL money they do or don't have, but they're good. They're always consistently good. That's why they're ranked number 25 here. So, in the sense, I mean, if it's me, I far prefer to have, if I'm a fan, BYU's schedule. You've got good names. You've got good teams here. Arizona State, Iowa State, Texas Tech, both interesting. You get Utah. Utah's always a top 30 team. Probably going to find themselves in the top 25 at some point. You're going to have chances to get big wins, but I don't necessarily want to play a murderer's row. It doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I get why fans want it. I get why coaches want it. The truth is, I think you want to be the last man standing. You want to win conference championships, and the best way to do that is to rack up wins. You can't get to the conference championship game if you don't have 10 wins, and if you play a really hard schedule, you can't get there.
That's how Indiana made the playoff last year.
Exactly right. And it has long-term benefits, financially and from exposure, and that exposure leads to, ideally, again, recruiting, interest in your program. On the flip side, if you're Utah and you're coming off of what was a very down year, which I still laugh at. The worst year Utah's ever had is like 5-7, which a lot of teams would be very satisfied with. Not great, but fine. 5-7 last year. You have 4 top 25 teams on your schedule going into the season. You beat those teams, especially at home in the rivalry game. Who cares where it's played? It's the rivalry game. It's always chaotic. Might as well not even be a home field advantage. You play 4 top 25 teams, you're going to have a chance to prove exactly who you are. And then when you play them at home, where it's notoriously very difficult to win at Rice Eccles, you're going to have a big opportunity to get some wins. So you're looking at this AP top 25 or the coaches poll top 25, and I don't want to bemoan it too long. It lays out opportunities for both BYU and Utah. BYU, conceivably, without an obvious quarterback, which we'll talk about coming up here in a moment, might have a slightly easier schedule. And that's really beneficial, if we believe that the coaches are correct here. Again, nobody thought Arizona State was going to be good last year. Nobody thought BYU was going to be good last year. There was some hope for Colorado. They certainly exceeded expectations. Kansas certainly exceeded expectations as well to get to where they were. And you ended up playing a lot of them. And Utah lost to Houston. BYU lost to Kansas. It's what undid their season. But we thought last year, if you played Oklahoma State and Utah did and beat them, it was going to be a stream of green lights in front of them, and that certainly proved to not be the case. So at least for now, I think I'd prefer to have BYU's schedule, only having 2 of these top 25 teams versus Iowa State and versus Texas Tech on back-to-back weeks. Then you do play Utah, of course, but Utah has an opportunity to prove that they are certainly the cream of the crop in the Big 12, the way the gambling sites would like you to believe that they are. All right, I want to let you hear from all 3 quarterbacks at BYU. And they all spoke over the weekend, or I should say on Friday, and kind of discussed, A, being in a quarterback battle, and B, either what they bring to the field or what they expect to see. Let's start with McCae Hillstead, who I would think today is probably the front runner to be the day 1 starter.
So Utah State, true freshman season. Obviously, you learn a lot. Good things, bad things, and, I had ups and downs over the course of that season, but I think learning the speed of college football is a big thing because it is different for sure. So learning that, and then obviously learning from some of the mistakes that you make, but then, still going out there and playing your game when it comes down to it. That was a big thing, just gaining that confidence while I started a few games up there.
That's McCae Hillstead, and I think he's right. And look, this applies to everything you've done in life. The first time you do it, your first day at work, your first time driving a car, whatever it is, it's going to be scary. You're not going to be very good at it. And you may have more talent. You may be naturally or physically improved over some others. And we can talk about that with McCae Hillstead and his height. In fact, he touches on it here in just a second. But I think the fact of having taken live reps, having been out there, having dealt with the crowd, knowing what it's like, I do think that makes you an obvious front runner, even if it's just for a quarter, even if it's just for a half. If all things are equal, to get the start there, give yourself an opportunity to just settle in, even if BYU's coaches decide that at some point they know they're going to make the switch to a younger quarterback, to one of the freshmen, or to the freshman in Bear Bachmeier, to go with a more experienced player right out of the gate, just to ease everybody else's job. But we do talk about the physical differences, and that's why I think this is a big conversation between McCae Hillstead and Bear Bachmeier, who's 4 inches taller, probably has 40 pounds on him. Here's what McCae Hillstead had to say about his height.
It's how I've been my whole life, really, Obviously, there's, just things that I've figured out, and I see it the way I see it, and, it doesn't slow me down, because obviously I can't just grow automatically. I can't choose that, right? It's out of my control. I think really just, figuring out the game how I have up to this point all throughout high school, Utah State, now here, being confident in my ability, which I am, and just going out there and trying to win.
Height, look, you can't argue with it. The truth is you want to have a 6'4", 6'5" guy. And look, if they're big-time runners, and look, we've seen big runners that are tall. Lamar Jackson's huge. Colin Kaepernick was huge, and his ability to run was certainly a difference maker and got him to the Super Bowl. So the ability to have size and to scramble is certainly helpful. But at the same point, I do agree with McCae Hillstead. It's all he's ever known. He didn't lose 4 inches. He's not trying to make up for something he previously had. It's not an injury he's dealing with. This is a guy who's been small his whole life, has found a way to, I don't want to say overcome it, but compensate for it on the field. That's why he is where he is. That's how he got to Utah State. That's why he got an offer from Utah State to transfer to BYU. So in that sense, while I'm a big believer that you have to have the physical tools size-wise to be able to get there, I do respect that approach. That it's always what I've been. It's always what I've dealt with. It's not a setback for me. It's always what I've had. I think that's what's interesting. All right, let's start with Treyson Bourguet now on how he likes to play quarterback. He might be the biggest mystery man, I guess, of this group. Not that Bear Bachmeier has been on campus, but that Treyson Bourguet might be the lesser known.
I just want to show that I'm more than capable of doing everything on the field, whether that's running for 10 yards, throwing for 15 yards on a play, or even taking the easy completion for 5 yards. Whatever it is, I'm going to get the job done.
A little slept on. I would expect him to be the lowest man in the depth chart, but maybe I'm totally wrong on that. But McCae Hillstead's experience, Bear Bachmeier's recruiting, I think probably gives him the leg up. And in that sense, I think it's up to Treyson Bourguet to prove in camp what he can do. This is what he said he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I just want to continue to show that I'm worthy to play at this level. Big 12, that's one of the best conferences in the country, and I want to just continue to show that I'm ready for this level of competition, and I can go out there and compete with the best.
Can you clarify?
I think what gets interesting with that is the question is, what does BYU end up wanting from their quarterbacks? If you are Utah this year, and not to compare these two teams over and over, but Utah needs a lot from Devin Dampier. Utah's going to need him to go out there and be a star. Whether that's with his legs, probably not going to be with his arm, but with his decision-making, RPO decision-making, how to use his legs, that's going to be extraordinarily important for Utah this year. They need him to be a star. And actually, if Utah ends up defaulting to needing him to be a game manager, I think Utah's going to be in trouble. We don't know what BYU needs from their quarterbacks right now. We were talking about it in the last segment because we heard from A-Rod talking about LJ Martin slimming out, looking better. He's one of the best players on the team. He's going to carry a huge load. And if you've got a running back who has and again, it remains to be seen, talented offensive line in front of him that makes his life easy, and they can shorten games, and BYU's defense can step up and make plays, special teams can step up and make plays, BYU may not need a quarterback to go out there and win them a lot of games, which...
That's what happened last year.
That's what happened last year. And look, I want to make sure we give Jake Retzlaff credit. He was terrific in 2-minute situations. He was terrific in late-game situations. Marching down the field at Rice-Eccles Stadium with that much pressure, you're back against the wall, big third downs, big fourth downs if I remember correctly. Finding ways to make plays is really important. You have to make 4 or 5 throws throughout a game if you want your team, basically every game, not every game, not against Portland State, but in the biggest games, you're going to have to make some big-time throws. And Jake Retzlaff consistently did it, and if he didn't make the throw, he made the plays with his legs. You do have to go out there and win games if you're a quarterback, if you're going to compete at the highest level. Very rarely do teams get to the highest level, which means competing for a conference championship in a P4 school, in a P4 conference, without the quarterback breaking through and having to do something special or spectacular. And I do think Jake Retzlaff had some truly spectacular moments last year, even if BYU didn't need him to throughout every game. Because, yes, you would get a big punt return or kick return for a touchdown or takeaways or pick sixes or better running performances from LJ Martin. But there's a chance that that's not what BYU even has available to them this year. They may not have a quarterback who's capable of going and making special plays. And if they don't trust the quarterbacks to make those special plays, they may default to a guy like Treyson Bourguet to step up and be a little bit more of a safe quarterback. If Hillstead takes too many hits, which he likes to do, he likes to sit back there and play like he's Josh Allen, despite the fact that he's not that size. Or Bear Bachmeier is making too many mistakes early because these are good teams he's going against in the Big 12, even though they're not playing against the top 25 opponents like we talked about. Maybe you go with a safer game manager, and that might be the pathway for him to getting on the field. I just don't expect it to be game one. And that could be how he ends up getting there. All right, speaking of Bear Bachmeier, let's hear what he had to say about competing for the job as a freshman.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you go to school or any environment, you want to play, you want to compete. Obviously, circumstances arose and kind of opens up an opportunity, so kind of got to take it and do your best with that.
Again, I think the excitement about Bear Bachmeier, and DJ talked about it in the first segment when he sat down with us, is that he has it between the ears. And that's, it's a kid who goes to Stanford and has the ability to go to Stanford, what he sees there and what the value is. Why you hope he steps in and can compete at BYU. You hear the confidence there in his words. Here's what he said he had to like about A-Rod's scheme.
I think one of the things Coach Mitchell and Coach Aaron advocate for is, playing free and playing to your strength in your game, off-platform throws and, making plays, if it's third and whatever, having the capability to use your legs to go get that first down, so I think it's a great scheme and I think that's why we won a great amount of games last year.
Consistently, you do hear the quarterbacks competing for this job talking about using their legs. And you have to, anymore in college football. Not everyone, but for the most part, you have to be able to do that. And I think that does play into Aaron Roderick's scheme. And it's going to be beneficial for BYU. Again, Jake Retzlaff made some terrific throws. He still had huge plays with his legs, and maybe some of the most important moments, including against Utah, was the ability to pick up first downs or scramble into the end zone from 25 yards out in big moments. And that's something that you're going to have to utilize. Let's hear then from A-Rod about what he had to say about this quarterback battle and how it's unfolded so far through 5 days.
We're giving equal reps to three guys. You guys know who the three are. They're doing a good job. It's too soon to, try to measure any separation or anything like that. I think we need to give everybody more opportunities before we start to try to make any kind of decisions. It's going to be a minute.
I'll be curious how long that lasts. That's going to be the big question at BYU. Again, I would suspect they try and narrow this down to 2. Those reps are just so valuable and they're so limited right now in camp that even though you're going to have some time in the non-conference a little bit with Portland State, I don't think you want to wait too long, and A-Rod touched on that.
There's no deadline, but the sooner the better. I would prefer not to be naming a starter on game day, but you have to let it play out a little bit too. If you rush it, you can create some other issues as well. So we need to let him compete for a little while. I know you guys are going to keep asking me every time, but I have to let him compete for a little while so we gather enough information to make a good decision.
And I think that's got to be the difficult part, because you would like everybody to operate, Christian, I think, on the same speed. You'd like everyone to say, well, yeah, everyone get at 2 practices, everyone should be at the same point. 4 practices or number of reps, everyone would be at the same point. And as we talked about with DJ in the first segment, and as we've seen over and over, sometimes it's the second game. Sometimes it's the second half. Some guys aren't going to show off right away early on, and some guys could take a little bit longer to learn the scheme. But once they do figure it out, their ceiling increases significantly, and I think that's got to be one of the most difficult parts of the job for A-Rod.
And where it's a 3-way battle and the reps are even more split between the players, that kind of makes it hard. And if you don't have somebody who is head and shoulders above the rest, this really could play out. And last year with Jake Retzlaff, it was rumored that he was the starter, but we really didn't know until game 1.
I would be curious how having players with somewhat similar skill sets helps and hurts the process. When you have guys who maybe you're not looking for just like who's going to be the best passer, and that's who we're going to go with. But it's a combination of, kind of dual threat guys and guys who can make some plays with their legs, and how difficult that becomes, because so often those are the gamer situations that we're talking about. So often those are, you read the defense in the moment, or you bet on yourself in the moment, and you have the ability to make that play when it presents itself. That's really difficult to, I think, see all the time in practice. That's difficult to see when
it's intangible. You can't measure that. Who rises up to the occasion on Saturdays? And
Ron McBride has told the famous story. Jake repeats it of they had a running back up at Utah, and he said, "Well, coach, the defense wasn't supposed to be there. And as we practiced, the defense was never there, and I was able to hit this hole. And then in the game, the defense was there." It's like, yeah, that's the game. The defense is going to operate a certain way, and the offense, when you're in camp, is going to know how the defense is going to prepare. And when you actually get to the game, it's going to be different. I think that's going to be the major difference there, and the difficulty of why making this decision, whoever they pick, is probably not somebody I'm going to have total confidence is going to be the starter throughout the entire season. I don't think, even though it worked with Retzlaff last year, I don't think the guy they pick necessarily becomes an overwhelming favorite to be the starter even by the time BYU opens up Big 12 play. Let's hear one more cut from A-Rod on his process to picking the starting QB.
It's always a challenge, but I've been through this enough times. I hope people will have some confidence that we can get this done. We've done it before. We have a good process that we go through. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to work through it, and the whole team's going to watch it happen. So whenever that starter is named, everybody on the team will know, oh, yeah, of course, we just watched it happen on the field. And so we'll just keep working our way through it, just as we've done in the past with Zach and Jaron and Baylor, et cetera, right? We've been through this before last year with Gary and Jake, and we'll do it again.
there's value in that. Even though, as we talked about with avocados last week, just because you're picking through avocados and you've done it before, that doesn't mean you're going to have ripe ones every time you go to the grocery store. And maybe BYU doesn't have a ripe quarterback right now. They've been through this process, and they're probably better equipped to figure out what they are looking for, and maybe what can be fool's gold in practice and what can be real.
Well, and you think of those examples that he gave out. Seems like they picked the right one every time.
They did. I would also note, and maybe last year's the difference, like Zach over Jaren was not a difficult decision, right? At all. Everyone knew Zach was good, and he had shown out when he had been on the field before, so I think that was pretty obvious. And then Jaren was the man in waiting. Good for Jaren for waiting, because then it became very obvious that Jaren Hall was going to be the guy, and, there was falsely some hope that maybe he would be better than Zach Wilson. I think we were forgetting how good Zach Wilson was in college when that was the expectation, hence being the number 2 overall pick. But I do think that was a little bit more obvious. And those were, I guess, in a sense, what we're talking about with our avocado comparison last week. Those were 2 really ripe avocados you were picking between. You probably weren't going to go wrong. We don't know if that's what you have this year, but to your credit, and to your point, they have made the right decision more often than not. Maybe Keaton Slovis being the exception there because he was not terrific.
And he didn't really have somebody to compete against.
No.
He was just supposed to come in and be the guy.
And it was Retzlaff, and when Retzlaff did get on the field after Keaton Slovis slowed down, Retzlaff was not good his first year at BYU before developing into the second year, which goes back to the point of why this is so difficult. You can even be prepared, or you can be good. It might need 6 bad starts before you're good. Most teams don't have that type of leeway to let that happen. All right, good sound from BYU. Fun to listen to those guys talk. We'll get you sound from Utah as well throughout the week. We're going to be talking the Buffalo Bills. Get a preview on their season in Hard Knocks with Katherine Fitzgerald. She's going to join us next. Stick around, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. A very happy Monday to everybody out there. Jake will be back with us before the end of the week, but rolling solo today. Let's welcome in our next guest, though, as we continue to bounce around the NFL, get some previews on the big teams, including the big teams with big local players. Let's start today with the Buffalo Bills. Katherine Fitzgerald. You can read her coverage of the Buffalo News. You can also find her on Twitter at KFitz134. It's Katherine Fitzgerald. Hey, Katherine.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, let's start with the biggest local name. We'll touch on a couple, but the biggest local name, of course, is Dalton Kincaid. When you invest a first-round draft pick, specifically in a tight end and a pass-catching tight end, I think the expectations have to be through the roof. Been some ups and downs for Dalton Kincaid. What's been the grades so far on that pick, and how are fans feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, there have been some ups and downs. Obviously, he was working through – I think he just passed me on a scooter, actually. I'm talking from outside Bill's training camp where the players stay in the dorms here and the media stay in the dorms as well, so you get to see guys going to and from lunch. But like you said, there's been some ups and downs for him. Working through that knee injury last year that we didn't know the extent of really until the end of the season. Obviously, he was on the injury report with it, but didn't know how bad it was. So, that puts things in a little more perspective. But I think anytime, when you've got a team with Josh Allen and you give him a potential weapon like that, you want to see some highlight reel plays. End of the season was a little hard for Kincaid. He's been very open about that. But I think people are looking to see him bounce back a bit this year after dealing with some of those injuries. And he's looked good so far in camp. He had a really strong camp last year as well. So it's good to see him getting back into the groove of things.
The big drop was huge against Kansas City. That's on fourth down on a catchable ball. That was a big play. How is he going to bounce back? Because we saw him. I mean, he didn't drop anything here at Utah, hence being a first-round pick. But he battled through a lot. He was not a big recruit. He was not a big transfer, and he obviously developed into a star at the college football level. How do you expect him to bounce back from that?
Yeah, I think it starts with kind of that mental aspect of the bounce back, and he's been really strong in that. There were teammates telling him to take accountability for it, and he did. He talked after the game, putting it all on himself, and I think that's where it starts culture-wise for this team of him stepping up and being like, no, that's on me. I've got to make these plays. But you see his rapport with Josh Allen is really strong, and I think Josh is going to go to him time and time again, Kincaid wants those big moments. And I think, recognizing what happened, but still, demanding those plays, that's what you want to see in one of your playmakers.
As we know, the NFL stands for not for long. What type of a leash does he have? How long will Buffalo continue to invest in him?
I think he's got a pretty long leash. This team saw a lot of him in college. Brandon Beane has spoken so highly of him time and time again. Obviously, they do want to see a little bit more out of him, but I think they've been candid with him about that of, we want a little more out of you, but we trust you. We think you can work through that, and that's why we're being hard on you because we care about you is kind of the vibe they're giving off. So I think there's still a lot of trust in Dalton Kincaid.
And then another local player who was maybe one of the most underappreciated players to come from our state is Taron Johnson, who has been a staple on the defense for the Buffalo Bills this year. And we'll talk about the defense in a moment because obviously it's the big question mark. But how has he played and what type of a player has he been during what's now nearly a 10-year career in Buffalo?
I know. It's been incredible to see just what he's done over that span. He's such a pillar of this defense. There's been some turnover on the defense, especially in the secondary the last stretch. But I think just there's so much trust in Taron and what he's able to do. We see him being more and more of a vocal leader. I think that's been really big of him growing into that a bit after, there were a lot of veterans on this defense for a long time. And in the last year, 2 years, it's shifted a bit. And he's taken on that leadership role on top of making plays. And maybe that's where it starts. Other guys see his example on the field and they want to emulate that. And they go to Taron to see kind of like, what are you doing that I can, put myself in these positions as well. Super friendly guy, celebrates his birthday at training camp every year. But I think it's just been fun to see him kind of take that next step in the behind the scenes aspect of being a leader on this team.
Not the level of defense last year from Buffalo that we've seen, and still they were so close to getting to the big game. What is changing this offseason on the defensive side of the ball, and what's the expectation there?
Yeah, I think, Brandon Beane, their general manager, is always talking about how it starts up front, and they've revamped their defensive line a good bit. It's going to take a bit to see exactly what that looks like. They brought in Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi, both of whom will miss the first 6 games of the season with suspension. So it's a little interesting to have 2 guys that are new to the system who are going to miss time. That they brought in rookies as well through the draft. So it's, they're refiguring out some things on the defensive line especially. But I don't think we'll fully get a taste of that until, honestly, those guys come back week 7. It's still going to take some time for them to rebuild some of that chemistry with their teammates. But the Bills feel confident in their plan for those guys missing time and getting reacclimated. So we're going to see how that plays out.
Big expectations for Joey Bosa?
I think so. I mean, they brought him in for a reason. He obviously has an injury history and has been dealing with that some here as well. Missed a little bit of time in the spring during, I believe it was the end of OTAs and mini camp, but he's been, had some vet rest days here, but still they've been working him in, trying to get him to be a part of it. I don't think they want to put too much on his plate, but they want him to be involved in this defense for sure. So I think they think he still has some juice. I think it's been a refreshing new chapter for him. He's talked to us about how much he's loved the way they run training camp here. And, to have a veteran guy say he's enjoying training camp when it can wear and tear on guys is always important. So I think he's a little rejuvenated now that he's back out there. But, it's going to take an entire team for that defense to come together.
Katherine Fitzgerald joins us. We're breaking down the Buffalo Bills. They are so familiar to fans in the state of Utah, not because of the names on the team, but they are going through something right now, and they obviously did in the early 90s as well, that the Utah Jazz went through in the late 90s, which is you are very obviously the second best team.
Yeah.
And the one team in front of you has Michael Jordan, or the one team in front of you has the superstar, and obviously that's Mahomes here. So how have they discussed or handled or resisted, or maybe they haven't resisted, trying to reform themselves to just like beat the one team, because that's a trap. They are playing extraordinarily well. They are doing basically everything right. There just happens to be one other team out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it in how they form their roster. Going back a few years, this is a less relevant example now, but I think it illustrates the point. When they brought in Von Miller a few years ago, Brandon Beane openly was like, we need him to be a closer. When it comes to playoff games against Kansas City, we still need a closer. We haven't had that on the defensive line, and we are shaping our roster this way to counter them. Now, they can't do everything just to counter Kansas City, because you also have, you know, your Baltimore's, you look around the AFC, it's stacked. So you can't just react to Kansas City. But I think you do see some of that flavoring of the team of they know who's knocking them out year after year, and they need to respond to that. On an individual player level, I think, you know, Josh Allen has talked about it a lot of candidly kind of saying he's sick of it still being a topic, but the only way to get people to stop talking about it is to finally knock them out. And so they still need that win to kind of erase this narrative or move on from this narrative, rather, that they can't beat Kansas City, because until you do it in the playoffs, it doesn't matter.
Is that what it feels like right now, even in camp, that this is purely about the playoffs and purely about one potential matchup?
No, that's a great question, but I think they do a good job of, you know, during camp and everything, really staying in the moment of knowing, you know, they set goals as benchmarks on the way to that ultimate goal of we want to win our division. We want to have home field advantage, stuff like that. It's not fully built around Kansas City, but I think that still lingers a little. I mean, we're asking about it, obviously. But I think within meetings, within practices, within, you know, just the moment-to-moment nature of this, they're focusing on kind of what can we do to be the best version of ourselves right now, and that will ultimately lead us to that goal.
I love it. My co-host, who's not here today, hates it, but I get excited for Hard Knocks every year. Has it changed anything about what you've sensed at practice so far?
No, not really. I was curious to see how it would play out. They've got a huge crew here. You know, there's been, I want to say, like 37 members from the Hard Knocks crew here on some days. Wow. So they're around for sure, but I think the team's done a really good job of just kind of focusing on what's going on. It will be interesting now that there's a little drama with James Cook and his desire for a contract extension, to see if that changes any of the nature of camp when there's extra cameras here. That just started yesterday, so it's still a little early to say. But I think so far, you know, every now and then a guy will ham it up for the camera, but there's not too much of a distraction, if that makes sense.
What's the confidence in the running game?
In the running game? Right now it's a little chaotic. I think, honestly, just this offense as a whole is dealing with so many injuries. They're not too much at running back right now, so that's good. But I think we're all kind of in a waiting game to see what goes on with this James Cook hold-in. He has been, you know, here at camp present but not participating since yesterday. He began the hold-in 8 days into camp, which is unusual. But when he's on the field, you know, and when you have that dual threat in Josh Allen, they've really built this running game up over the last few years. And I think that continuity on the offensive line, bringing back all their starters, bringing back depth guys has been so important just as they, you know, continue to run that ball.
We did set a world record for talking about the Buffalo Bills in the year 2025 without bringing up Josh Allen for the first 12 minutes of the interview. So I'm going to pat us on the back, but it would be silly to not talk about him. Where he is, you know, he's truly in the elite class of NFL quarterbacks. He's top 2, top 3 at absolute worst. Is there an expectation that he needs to do more? Is that even reasonable, or is this the player that Buffalo has and everyone else needs to step up?
I mean, I think it depends on who you're asking, because if you ask Josh directly, he is always trying to do more. He's trying to turn over every stone to find a little more in his game, and that's coming off winning MVP. You know, when we talked to him the first day of camp, he got into some of the things he's still working on, but just stressing over and over that until they win it all, there's more he can do. I don't know that's exactly how his teammates feel, his coaches feel. I think they know the caliber of play he has, just his ability to make plays happen out of nowhere. So I don't think there's like external expectations on him of we need you to do more. But I think he's so internally motivated that he's raising that level.
Does it feel like they're still ascending as a team? Does it feel like Buffalo's still getting better, or is there a fear that if this doesn't happen and they don't break through in the next year, if maybe this year, and if not next year, that they could start to age a little bit? They could lose that open championship window?
It's a good question. I think their team belief is as long as they have Josh Allen, that window is open. Now you look at some of the makeup of the rest of the team, guys are going to be, they're not going to be able to keep everyone year after year. We've seen turnover here and in years that they thought they really had it all. So I don't know that it's like this year or nothing. But I do agree that when you have Josh Allen, you're always giving yourself a chance. But I think the longer they go without really making it all the way, it puts more pressure on the coaching staff and the GM, I would say.
Saturday morning our time, Saturday afternoon your time, they take on the Giants. What are you watching for in the first preseason game?
Oh, well, it's what's so interesting. I mentioned injuries before. I'm interested to see who steps up. They're so banged up at wide receiver right now. Guys are getting reps with Josh Allen that you wouldn't usually expect. Now, I don't think Allen's going to play this weekend, but I think just for anyone who's able to get a chance on the field, wide receiver especially, it's such a critical position, and they're missing multiple starters right now. I believe they just got Joshua Palmer back today off the top of my head, but I think they were without 4 of their wide receivers today. Khalil Shakir is such an important player for this offense, and he's going to miss multiple weeks. So that's where I'm looking to see who steps up there.
You mentioned, what was it, all but one pick in the first 6 rounds was defense? I mean, that's got to be the focus, right?
Yes. Whether they say it or not, they want to build this defense back up and just kind of give them the chance in big games. Again, they know what Josh Allen can do. Obviously, it didn't work out this past year, and that kind of fell on the offense of not being able to sustain that last drive. But I think they still need their defense to step up in the playoffs a little bit more, and they're trying to get creative with it. They brought in some new coaches as well for the defensive staff. Like I mentioned earlier, kind of revamp that defensive line. They've got young guys in the secondary. So they're trying everything they can just to, really tighten down that defense and make the most of what this team can be.
Katherine, who's the biggest threat in the AFC East? Outside of Buffalo. Who's the biggest threat in the AFC East outside of Buffalo?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's not a murderer's row.
Yeah.
If we're being honest.
I don't know. I don't really trust these other teams in the AFC East right now, to be honest. I think that's why I'm having a hard time picking them. When we look around, they just, they feel like they're all still a few years behind. I don't trust the Dolphins. I feel like maybe they're the closest, but I don't. There's something about the way they just always kind of seem to fall apart a bit to me. So I don't know. I'll have to think about that.
And the Jets are the Jets, and the Patriots haven't been good for a decade now, it feels like.
Exactly. So, it's a messy division.
Hey, Katherine, really great stuff. Enjoy the rest of camp. I'm sorry you probably have to watch Hard Knocks and aggregate it and don't just get to watch it, enjoy it like the rest of us. But good luck.
The 9 p.m. start time is tough, but, we'll see how it goes.
Find her on Twitter at KFitz134. You can read her in the Buffalo News. Great stuff, Katherine. Thanks.
Thank you.
There she is, Katherine Fitzgerald, giving us a breakdown on the Buffalo Bills, one of the teams that I told you I've sold my stock on, but remains a true contender in the NFL. And while we talk about their championship window potentially closing, that just might be what they have to do with the Bill or with the Chiefs. Unfortunately, is just hope that at some point Travis Kelce's no longer what he was, and he's not, and Mahomes maybe doesn't have the weapons around him to be the guy. But we thought last year would be the year that he wouldn't have the weapons around him, and he still found a way to make the big plays when they needed to get to the Super Bowl, where they were promptly trounced by the Eagles.
I saw an interesting stat that no coach and quarterback duo has ever won a Super Bowl after being together for 5 years and not winning a Super Bowl.
And not winning.
McDermott and Josh Allen are going into their 8th season together.
It's like if you can't do it, you can't. You already know you can't do it. Man, who would be? It's like McNabb and Andy Reid. I'm thinking of like quarterbacks that would be in that conversation that were very close and were very good, and head coaches that were very good and found a way to do it. I didn't ask about it. kind of tough, and I should have. Does McDermott, if they don't win it this year, is McDermott the thing they change?
It's hard because
he's good.
Clearly he is a good enough coach.
He's a really good coach, yeah.
But it's just, at some point, it's like you got to make changes, and if you don't try at least a head coaching change, but then you don't want to get worse. For as good of a head coach as he is, the possibility is very real that if you go somewhere else, you get much worse, and that hurts.
That's the gambit. But, you look at Tampa Bay, and they get Tom Brady. Now, it helps, and they add Bruce Arians, or I think it was the other way around, but Bruce Arians wasn't there. Was it 3 years? He won a Super Bowl his second year. Like, having guys who know how to do it, not that he'd won a Super Bowl before, but like getting that guy, getting that experienced coach to break through can be the difference sometimes. And I'd be curious where they would look. Bill Belichick, I'd be curious where they would look, but I don't think it would be Bill. But maybe if Bill wants to get back into coaching, he'd be interested in going to Buffalo. He certainly dominated that division before. Really good stuff from Katherine. Thanks to her for jumping on and giving us some really good stuff on the Buffalo Bills, who are one of the most interesting teams in the NFL this year, hence starring on Hard Knocks beginning tomorrow, which I'm excited to watch. All right, we'll wrap up the show coming up next. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Two amigos on the airways, talking sports. They got him Matrix and also loves his tie-dye. Ben's got style with his scarf. Oh my.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. If you have a product or business that you're passionate about, would like to have it endorsed by our show, simple. All you have to do is text JB to 57500. Though Jake's song that he wrote would not let you know that that's the number 57500. Text the show, JB, 57500. And our sales staff will take care of the rest. Again, JB to 57500.
Sponsor the show!
A quick update on the Bang, 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 Come On Man, I've Got It All on Record, Astronomer, Marker Morris, Bozo of the Week Award from Marcus Morris from last week. He's talking. He's not clearing anything up. He is on a podcast with his brother, Markeith, and he explained the charges. And see if you can help me figure out what's going on here, because I'll just read it to you because I've read this 5 times and I don't know what he said, and it's because he's not saying anything. It says, "Don't ever put my name with nothing but fraud," which I think is the opposite of what he meant to say, right? Like, don't put my name with fraud is what I imagine he was trying to say. He said, "Don't ever put my name with nothing but fraud. This is not fraud activity. I've never wrote a check to no casinos in exchange for money that I can put in my pocket. I wrote exchange for credit thinking that you know the source of the income and you know that what I've done in past years to pay it back plus the money back that I chose to take from you all to gamble with. So, I just want to clear that up and then you could take it how you want." What? So if he had said something along the lines of, "Oh, I like to gamble. I'm a high-stakes gambler, but I'm not going to carry $250,000 in cash into a casino," or, again, this was over 2 different events in 2 different casinos a month apart from one another. If he wanted to say, "Hey, I'm not bringing in 6 figures in cash to exchange for chips," or however they do it at that level, I certainly don't think expect people to bring cash in. And I just thought that was the money I had time to pay it back. That would be one thing. That's not what he said.
I think he's trying to say that he didn't write a check to receive actual money. It was just casino credit.
I think he thinks, and maybe this is the case, and I've just misread this, he believes that people think the fraud is that he's going in, getting a loan to gamble with from these casinos, and then just walking out the door with the money so he has the money.
That's what it reads as he thinks. That's how he understands the situation.
And I think everybody else thinks, maybe I'm wrong, but how I certainly view it is that you're gambling with money that you don't have and you lost all the money gambling and now you can't pay it back. That's what I have assumed this story has been about now for, I guess, the week that we've been talking about it, is that he's gambling with money he does not have. And if it was as simple as just paying it back, he would have paid it back because he could have avoided 2 days in jail had he just paid them back with what I assume is his, $50, $60+ million in career earnings after taxes as a decade-long NBA player. He did talk about being in jail. He said, you could think about me this way, but I know what my loved ones and the people that surround us and the people we surround ourselves with really feel about us. But listen, jail, don't mess with jail. Don't mess with it. That's why we had to do this stuff outside, because I couldn't sit in no small room. I came home and I slept outside. He did have to sleep in jail for 2 days, and I bet that's claustrophobic.
Speaking of jail, did you watch Happy Gilmore 2?
Okay, so I turned it on. I fell asleep before the spoiler, and I woke up at the very end. I missed, as we were talking about with DJ Naps, I missed the middle 90 minutes.
You fell asleep before the spoiler?
Yeah, which is
That's
right off the
literally
bat.
2 minutes in.
I fell asleep so fast on the couch.
That's
I took
funny.
a nap throughout. So I'm going to say I've seen it, and I didn't actually watch it.
I didn't know that there were actual golfers in it, like Scotty,
Tons
Rory,
of golfers, yeah.
Brooks, Bryson. Like, they're all in it. They play a pretty big role.
And that was very funny with Scotty Scheffler's in jail the entire time.
It makes fun of Scotty Scheffler in jail. Like, he gets arrested and he says, like, oh, not again.
And
That
then
was
he's
really
in jail.
funny.
Both times I saw him in the movie, he was in jail, which I thought was very funny. All right, Hans and Scotty coming up next. Christian, thanks for all your work today. We'll be back tomorrow, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.